My HDA is called Sword Roman. The default sword is the Spatha longsword. The different components of the sword are broken up into these tabs. You can adjust the blade, the crossguard, grip, grip rings, pommel, and pommel knob, and they're all structured relatively the same. I'd like to start with the blade, typically. So let's say we want to make this a gladius, kind of a shorter sword. We could start with the transformation, make the strong length shorter, maybe the weak length a little bit longer, maybe decrease the width just a bit. You can adjust the width of the sword very specifically. So 1 is the base of the sword and 6 is the top of the sword. Typically these are kind of so low you don't quite see them too much, but you can really get specific shapes. And the weak roundness is the top of the sword. Adjust how round you want that. The depth of the blade. So by default it's got this is called a fuller, so it's kind of got a flat edge here that's got a bit of a transition up to a point there. Sometimes a gladius is just to a straight point throughout the entire blade, so you can adjust all of this manually. You can bring down the top edge and the bottom edge. See how those went away. Bring up the center edge. Now you have a uniform point. Similarly, you can bring it back, bring the top edge up, and have the bottom edge match it. And you can even adjust the location of those transitions there. You'll notice the number of rows will actually affect how quickly that transition happens. Moving on to the crossguard, we've got different types of crossguards. There's the square, round, bulge, swirl small, regular swirl, and swirl wide. And all of these have the same transformation controls. Their defaults are to 1, so they're all scalar operations that have been hard-coded to create the shapes that they have. So they all work the same. And translate adjust is to change how high up on the blade it is. You'll notice changing the topology can actually affect the entire shape of the crossguard. I like putting the round down to 3. I think that's pretty interesting. And even the columns can make it change as well. You can get kind of interesting shapes doing that. It's nice to just set it back. Just control middle clicking to get the default values back. Moving on to the grip. Turn off the grip rings for a minute. Same thing, you can notice the topology. Lowering it will affect it. Same thing. Increasing the columns and rows, we'll see the intended shape. Adjust the length, width, depth of it. Twist is somewhat interesting here. It's a neat little twist on the geometry. Translate adjust, same thing. So it's to change how the grip comes into the crossguard. Now these are parameters that are specific to certain grip types. So there's a straight, something I like to do with this one. Put the rows down to 5 and add a twist, and then it creates finger divots. And then if you decrease the columns, it creates kind of an interesting twisted look. And then you can even increase the subdivisions, and that'll also change it as well. But yeah, so the top scale is available on this straight grip type. And when it's on finger divots, you can adjust the depth of those divots. Moving on to the grip rings, you toggle it on. Same thing with the topology, you can adjust it. Rows and columns, the transformations, you can make the ring length longer, in which case you may need to adjust the spacing, and you can even change the placement, the Y adjust. Bring that back down. And the pommel, this is the round bulge. Change the topology. Same thing with the transformations. The defaults are 1 with hard-coded values. So the same settings can be used when you switch to the disk. Increase the topology to get the true shape. Adjust all of this. The pommel knob, the default's set on spike. Here's the spike settings. Topology, transformations, you can make it really long. The radius, and move it up and down. If you switch over to grapes, so you can change the base radius of this cone of grapes, and it's adaptive to the size of the grape. It's kind of aware of its density, so if you decrease the grape size smaller and smaller, there'll be more and more grapes, and you increase the grape size, fewer grapes, but the same size. The knob size at the end. And to get this cone shape to work for this disc-shaped pummel, I have this delete grapes function here. More helpful to use the X and the Z, so it cinches up to the disc. Putting the pummel back to the round bulge, and we can get rid of these delete values. So now to add ornamentation, go to the blade, click on the ornamentation tab, check on the text boolean feature. You can type whatever you want in the field. You can change the font size, tracking of the text, and then you can place it. Translate Y adjust is up and down, and the X adjust is helpful when you have something like a cue that kind of throws things off. Now to add the vine, just toggle the vine on, go to the vine tab. You can adjust the material. I typically leave it just on gold. You can adjust the vine radius, the height of the spiral's radius, the depth of the spiral, how many turns in the entire spiral. Spirals is the number of spirals, and you can translate vertically. A scale to point is a percentage of the entire height of the vine, so it scales the top of the vine to a point. If you go all the way to 1, it'll transition all the way from the bottom. The thorns, same thing, you can change the material. I typically keep it on the default. You can change the number of thorns, the length of the thorns, as well as the size of the thorns. Crossguard and grip don't have individual ornamentation. Go to the grip rings tab, click on the ornamentation tab, click on spiral wire. You can adjust the number of spirals, circular divisions, the number of points that make up the wave, the height of the wave, increase the frequency, the radius of the wire, the radius offset, and you can rotate it. So the spiral jewels, it's actually the same tool, just with different default settings. So if you increase the points and the height, you'll see it makes the same shape. Change the jewel radius, and you can rotate, which is useful for lining up with the wire spiral. Moving on to the pummel. So the round bulge pummel has the same ornamentation as the grip rings. It's a spiral wire and spiral jewel. You go up to the disc ornamentation, the ornamentation and disc ornamentation tab. Turn the pummel knob off. Back to the pummel, disc ornamentation. Turn on the flower ornament. You can scale the entire ornament. Translate Z adjust is useful if it gets eaten into the geometry for any reason. Outer circle, everything scales down with that. The number of instances controls this number of petals created with the wires. The outer balls are these 4 big balls, the size of the radius of those. The rope, you can change the radius of the rope, the width of the rope by the cross section, and you can change the rope segment length, which affects the shape of the rope. The curves and balls are these inner wire and balls right here. Change the number of petals there. Change the radius of the wire. And the curve wire extension is this straight wire that can reach out of the design when it goes negative and into the design when it goes positive. You can change the radius of this as well. The inner circle, change the radius. Same adjustments for the rope. Change the number of balls, their size by radius, offset the radius, and you can change their depth. The gem, change the circular divisions of the gem, its size by its radius, and the depth of it. And when it's at 1, it's a perfect sphere cut in half. So to add the petals, just toggle on petals. You can change their size by their radius, and the depth when it's set to 1 is actually just a sphere, but the default has a depth that makes it look somewhat like petals. You can change the number of them, as well as change their radius relative to the pummel. Now in the sword tab, you can check the scale of the sword by viewing a test Tommy by just toggling this on. And you can actually move the sword using transformations. If you're curious to see how it matches up with him, or even how it's going to fit into his hand, it's a good way to verify the scale is accurate. You can use character adaptive scale, import a character at any scale, and the sword will adapt to that size. You can view your character. So this will work with any humanoid character. And here's the Test Tommy original to see the difference. You can simply just turn this off to go back to the original scale. And materials is where you can change the material settings for whether it's a battle sword or it's a leisure sword. And this would be a leisure sword. The last thing to do would be to turn on all the noise. I have this noise master, which is basically a kill switch for ease of use purposes. So I'm going to toggle it on, go through each tab, check the topology, and turn on the noise for each component of the sword. Now the sword is a very dense mesh where noise has been added. Move on to the crossguard, add the noise in the topology tab. You can see it creates a more imperfect shape, creates nice variance, and really helps the realism of the texture. And the grip, topology, noise. Go to the grip rings, topology, noise. Pummel, move this up a little bit. Go to the topology tab, click noise. It may take some adjusting after the noise has been applied. And if there was a pummel knob on here, add some noise to it as well. And I'll leave the vine for last. And now to get the vellum simulation, to get the vine to wrap around the blade, you just have to skip ahead to 8+ frames. And there you go. Created a Gladius Leisure Roman sword.